In several recent interviews, DC Comics co-publisher Dan Didio has had to literally sit down and explain how the DC universe works for people. When it comes down to comic book and fantasy universes, no one has to sit down and explain things to people. Usually, most readers will figure things out for themselves on the shelves of a comic book store or a toy store. This is how it has always been, and this is the way it should be. If a universe is structured properly, people will figure things out within a couple of seconds just by looking at the covers, or after they've read the comics, they will figure things out fairly easily. When I was 15 years old back in 1989, I had picked up a Flash comic when I started collecting DC on a regular, and inside I found out that Wally West was the Flash. When I looked at some of my brother's old New Teen Titans comics, I soon saw that Wally West was the Kid Flash, and I was able to put two and two together, and I was easily able to figure out that Wally West, who was the Kid Flash, was now the Flash. And it was just as easy and simple as that. I had not read Crisis of Infinite Earths. I had not even heard of Crisis of Infinite Earths. All I wanted to do was pick up a Flash comic. And that was that. And from there, because I found out Wally West was the Flash, I quickly soon became a Flash reader. Same thing with DC Comics' other character, Beatrice DaCosta, who was known as Fire. I had some old DC Comics Presents comics that I inherited from my brother's collection, and I found out that there was this character called the Green Fury who was a part of the Global Guardians. And figuring out from the character's secret identity, I put two and two together and quickly figured out that the Green Fury was now this new character, Fire. It was not that hard for me to figure these things out. And it's not that hard for people to figure out how a universe works. I remember being even younger and figuring out from reading a DC Comics annual that there was a Superman of Earth 1, a Golden Age Superman on Earth 2, and then there was Ultraman who was on Earth 3. All very easy, very simple for me to follow. And that Earth 1 Superman was the main Superman of the DC universe. This is not rocket science, but according to this co-president at DC Comics, you have to sit down and explain the universe to people. You don't have to do this. I can go into other examples of fantasy and comic related products that people are having no problem figuring out. For example, most recently, Monster High. I remember being in the store around 2008, 2009 when Monster High first came out. And I was standing in the Toys R Us aisle and no problem, figured it out within 11 or 10 seconds. These are characters who are the daughters and sons of these famous monster characters. Did not take me that long to figure it out. Figured out who all the characters were. And then when I went over to YouTube and started watching the cartoons on the regular, I got to know the characters, I got to know the voices, and I got to see how much fun these characters were. Now I can't afford to collect these Monster High toys, but I really like them, and they really inspire me all the time. I mean, one of the reasons why I wrote the East Team series is because I wanted to do a concept of Monster High all grown up. But Monster High, again, very, very easy for anyone to figure out. Yet, we need multiple explanations to figure out how the DC Universe works. And I'll even, dial it back about 20 years to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Now, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, when it first came out, I remember reading a article in an old toy magazine that said no one would be able to figure this out. Yet, kids were able to figure it all out with these multicolored Rangers, a Megazord, that Dinozords that turned into the Megazord, a Dragonzord, a Titanus, an Ultrazord. People were able to figure that out on the toy store shelves fairly easily, and they were able to buy all the toys with no problems and no explanations from anyone. People just, again, they looked at the show, and if they went to the toy store shelf, they pretty much figured it all out. And I'll even rewind it further back, another 10 years from the 20 years that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers came out, and I'll talk about Transformers, another one that a lot of people, again, it was a no-brainer. You walked into the store, you had Autobots, you had Decepticons, you pretty much figured it out on the toy store shelf. It was never a problem. People will usually never have any problems figuring out fantasy universes. I can even go even further to Star Wars, Star Trek. No one has a problem figuring out a fantasy universe. It does not require a complicated explanation. People will just go to the shelf and figure it out because, I've seen kids figure this stuff out, again, it's a no-brainer. They'll just come in and they figure it out. And I mean, people right now are figuring out the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They can figure out that, you know, Iron Man is the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Then there's the Incredible Hulk. Then there's Thor. Then there's Captain America, the first Avenger. And then there's the Avengers. And then that leads into other movies. They figure it out, fairly easily. This is not complicated. You do not need a entire blueprint to tell people how a universe works. I mean, the mechanics of a universe, when it's done well, people can figure out within 11 seconds. I mean, even with my own SJS Direct imprint, I publish multiple titles that sometimes connect with each other, and I even publish series that connect with each other. One of the examples of it are these two books here, All About Marilyn and All About Nikki. Now, All About Marilyn is the story of the actress who played Nikki Desmond, and All About Nikki is the book that features the television episodes of the television series that Marilyn Marie played in. The Marilyn Marie character played in. And both of these books come together, and they form, a universe that readers can easily follow. And I've had no problem with people picking up both books and coming to understand how easy things follow. When it comes down to continuity, people had no problem figuring out that these two books are connected to each other. Some people can just look at the two covers and figure this out. That these two books are related to each other in some way, shape, or form. Same thing with your comic books. People have no problem figuring out how a universe works. And people think that, this is so complicated. Universes are not complicated, especially to those of us who have been working with fantasy and science fiction for many years. And when I started the ISIS series, way back in 2002 with the first ISIS book, people, again, they were able to easily figure things out. Now, I wrote this story in 2002, and I wrote a prequel to it called ISIS Trial of the Goddess, and published it in 2008. And most readers were able to figure out that both books tie in together. And when I put this book up on Smashwords and on Kindle, people have no problem figuring out that both Trial of the Goddess and ISIS work together, and that both books are, interconnected. And that many, I'll say again, they'll figure it out by just looking at the covers. Again, they'll look at the Ankh symbol on both books. They'll see ISIS on it, and it's, again, a no problem for either. And further to go along with the whole universe model, now I published this book, The Temptation of John Haynes, in 2011. And this book indirectly ties into ISIS. And again, I've had people pick up, after reading The Temptation of John Haynes, come in and pick up ISIS soon after to find out what happened to the Eastine character. Because the Eastine character here was in ISIS, and she was in Trial of the Goddess. And people were able to say, oh, Eastine is in ISIS, Eastine was in Trial of the Goddess, so Eastine is in Temptation of John Haynes, so I need to find out what happened with Eastine, so I'm going to go and pick up ISIS. Again, no problem. And this is something that readers can easily do, and they do it all the time, because they can just look at the covers, or in the case when they go to my Amazon page, they'll pick up various books and take a look at the synopsis and go, this book fits into this book. This character's name keeps popping up. And if I want to find out what happened to this character, I go pick up the other books, and find out what happened to them. That's how a universe works. That's how a universe has worked for over, 75, 80 years. People just, they figure out things easily. They look at names. They look at, character designs. They look at visuals. And eventually, they can usually easily figure out things on their own. When it comes down to comic fans, they'll figure it out easily. I had to figure it out easily back in the 1980s when I started collecting. My brother figured it out back in the 70s when he was collecting. It's not a hard thing to do. You don't have to explain a universe to people. You never have to explain a universe to people. They'll figure it out on their own. And if you have your universe structured properly, every story is an entry point. This is something I learned, a while back from Jim Shooter when he was writing his blog. And I found what he said to be absolutely correct, because I've had, from my experience, again, people will pick up The Temptation of John Haynes, And a lot of people use this book as the entry point for the SJS Direct Universe, and then they'll go back and go get Isis and Trial of the Goddess, or they'll go get, or if they're Maryland, people who like to read all about Maryland, they'll go pick up all about Nikki. Whenever, and the whole thing with most of these stories is every story has its own beginning, its own middle, its own end, and the reader has no problem picking up any of these stories and either going backwards into the universe or going forwards into the universe. It's not a problem. I mean, and I do this with people who are not comic fans. I do this with casual people, and they can just walk in and walk out. And this is just with, you know, again, these are two screenplay books, all about Marilyn and all about Nikki, and Isis and the Temptation of John Haynes. Those were fantasy books, and people have no problems figuring this out. And these are self-published books, and people have no problem going backwards and forwards, using a universe model that has been tested and proven for over 75 years. But according to Dan Didio, DC Universe, you have to sit down and explain this to people. This clearly shows me, there is something wrong here. Here's a guy in the South Bronx who's starting a self-publishing imprint, and he can figure out the mechanics of how a universe works, but yet we have a man with millions of dollars and a catalog of some of the best characters in the world, and he still can't figure out, how to make a universe work and how to make a universe accessible. What's wrong with this picture? I mean, getting people to buy comics is not a hard thing to do. You write good stories, the readers will come. You create great characters, or to take existing characters and make them fun and fascinating, and the readers will get excited and passionate about it. This is not rocket science. We don't need to explain, this character comes from this universe, this character comes from... It just bogs things down and slows things down. And when you slow things down, the reader can't get into the stories. What happens is the reader starts focusing on technical details and they stop focusing on story. And what you want to get people excited about is stories. And this is something that, I try to do on a regular basis with this SJS Direct imprint. I try to get people excited and enthusiastic. And the reason why I try to mention different characters, because I want readers, to go backwards and forwards and learn more about this universe of characters and, the stories that they're involved in. It's just like recently I did 2 stories to get people, interested in the John Haynes character. He makes an appearance in Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess here. He's a big component of that story, and the reason why I put him in there is because I wanted readers to get to know the John Haynes character, so that they could pick up the Temptation of John Haynes, which is a cornerstone of the SJS Direct universe. Now, the character makes his first appearance in the Isis series in this book, and he also makes an appearance in Isis Night of the Vampires. Also, parts of the continuity. And in this one, I introduced the whole concept of vampires in the SJS Direct universe as well. But I always try to make the continuity easy to follow, easy for readers to get into. And I want readers to, get excited about it. Both of those covers were also done by Bill Walker of the Hero Business. Check out his strip. It's a great strip. You're really going to enjoy it. But let me get back to the subject. But continuity is not that hard. You don't have to explain a universe to people. Universes are fairly easy for people to understand. They're easy to access. I mean, I'm doing this right now with this ISIS series. That was actually one of the those 2 books were like what is it? They're like that's the 8th and 9th book in the ISIS series. And over the last couple of years, I have published numerous ISIS series books, and here they all are. And they're out of order though. But the continuity in all of them is easy to follow. I mean, and that's because I studied the old school comic models and tried to make each story with its own beginning, its own middle, its own end. And I made them all their separate entities. Yes, they're interconnected by certain events and certain, characters, and then certain characters are mentioned. But you can go, backwards into the universe or forwards into the universe from any entry point. Every story is designed to be its own entry point and allow you easy access. And again, I've had no problem reaching new readers, completely new readers all over the world, because I follow time-tested traditional models for storytelling. The storytelling models that I see with the comic book industry, especially DC Comics, are completely dysfunctional. You're talking about offering every time people try to get into your universe or they start buying the comics, here comes a retcon, or here comes a reboot, or here comes some sort of major event where somebody either gets killed or somebody gets mutilated, and this prevents, again, readers from accessing the universe. And then you have to sit down after readers complain about these mistakes. You're sitting down trying to find a way to undo them, and this is one of the big problems with your comic book universe today, especially your DC Comics, is that people spend so much time trying to undo things that they mess up, or try to explain things that to people that you can't get into the stories and you can't get to know the characters. It becomes literally a headache, for people to access the universe because you're not focused on the right story points. And a lot of these guys, again, they don't understand how universes work, the mechanics of a universe works. And I believe some people get frustrated because they can't really, tell stories in the proper fashion. So what they do is they come here with these gimmick endings, and things like killing people, mutilating people. That really, shows me as a writer, people are they paint themselves into corners and they look for, easy ways out, like Deus Ex Machinas and other, quick fixes, and then they wind up, doing more harm to the overall structure of the universe than they would have done if they had came up with an organic ending. Because I look at a lot of these story models that are used at DC Comics, these multi-issue, multi-event crossovers, and many of these other, big events type story models that happen one after the other. And it truly shows me, that people really don't understand, the mechanics of storytelling, how stories work, or how story paradigms work. Because, I look at the mechanical structures and they're not functioning properly. A good comic writer or a good writer, it wants you to come into the story, very come in and come right out, and then get hooked on other stuff. What happens is when you have a good comic model, story comes in, you really want to get people in within 3 issues, and those 3 issues are just like, a basic story. It's like first issue is the beginning, the second issue is the middle, and the third issue is in the end. And by the end, you're already thinking about buying other comics. That's usually how it works, and that's one of the things I try to do with these 3 right here. You know, like with the Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, when I introduced the John Haynes character, I wanted people, to take a look back at the temptation of John Haynes. Same thing with Isis Night of the Vampires. That book ties into this East Team Undercover. It's part of a crossover, actually, and the 2 books are interconnected. And in these 2 books, I apply a different type of story model called, a parallel crossover, in which, events in both stories take place at the same time. And that was deliberately done so that you could go and take a look at the East Team series, because the East Team series has a big following, and I wanted the East Team readers to come over and look at ISIS, and I wanted the ISIS readers to come and take a look at East Team. So I put the story model to be parallel, so both readers could get into both books. And I did the Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess so that I could introduce John Haynes, so that readers could go and read the cornerstone book of the SJS Direct Universe, Temptation of John Haynes. But those are all tricks that comic publishers have used for decades. And that's what they do, is they cross things over, and they do it in regular books because they want you to go and take a look at other characters. Again, all 3 of these covers are done by Bill Walko from The Hero Business. Again, you can check his website out. His Hero Business strip is one of the best web comics out there right now. Again, give it a look. But he did a great job on all these covers. But the universe is easy. It crosses over. The universe is, that's how it works. I mean, people have been doing this for years. I mean, for years. And okay, I'm mixing them up, but oh well. But people have been doing this for years. I mean, this is why, Wonder Woman will make an appearance in a Batman comic, or Superman will make an appearance in a Batman comic. This is all done, to sell comics. If you see Superman in a Batman comic, That's to sell Superman comics, because you'll see Superman making a appearance there. And you go, wow, that's Superman. Okay, I'll go read Superman. Or that's Wonder Woman. Okay, I'll go see Wonder Woman. That's why they used to do team up comics back in the day. They wanted people to come in and start buying, other titles in the catalog, and that's why you create a universe, because you want readers to keep buying different books backwards and forwards, and you want them to get into each character and each character series. But it seems like people at DC can't get this. They don't understand, how the mechanics of this works. They don't understand, if you have to sit down and explain a universe to people, you have a problem, because you don't have to explain a universe to people. Again, I didn't have to explain this to people. I've been doing this since 2009, and I published the first ISIS book in 2002, and people have been able to pick up books in this catalog backwards and forwards without a single problem. And they don't know that, the first ISIS book was published in 2002. They don't know that Trial of the Gods was published in 2008. They don't know that Temptation of John Haynes was published in 2011. And they don't know that the first ISIS book was published in 2012. They don't know this. All they know when they come to the Amazon page that I have all my books on is that there's a catalog of titles, and they just come in and pick and choose whatever they want to pick. Every story is an entry point. Every story, brings the reader in, and that's the way DC Comics should be. I shouldn't have to explain a universe to people. It should be, I see Superman, I buy Superman. I see Superman with Batman, that makes me want to go buy Batman. I see Batman with other heroes, I want to go buy, those books that they're in. I see Justice League, and I see all the heroes together, and that makes me want to go out and seek out the adventures of those other characters. That's how people have discovered comics for the last 75 years, and that's how people will continue to discover, different characters. It's not that hard, yet you will have a guy like Dan Didio telling you that it's impossible, and that we need this multiverse. We don't need a multiverse to figure out things. People figured out that Justice Society was on Earth 2 for many years without a thought. People figured out, Earth 3 was where the DC heroes were the bad guys and the DC villains were the good guys. Not that hard. I mean, people can walk right in and figure things out for many, many years. I've seen people, figure things out right on the shelf when I was at the Forbidden Planet on 14th Street as a kid. And even then, I was looking at other titles besides Marvel and DC. I was looking at indies, and I was able to pick up things fairly easily. I mean, and even things like the Archie universe, I was able to figure out. It's not that hard. You don't need a big manual to explain things to people. You don't need multiple interviews to explain things to people. Fantasy universes are the easiest thing for people to figure out. I've had people, again, figure out the SJS Direct brand, SJS Direct titles, just walk right in, look at certain things, look at the logos, look at the character designs. They figure it out in a couple seconds, and they're buying ebooks and paperbacks, and it's not a problem. Why is it that a guy from the South Bronx can figure out, who is a struggling independent publisher can figure this out, but a multi-billion-dollar subdivision of Warner Brothers is still having problems? If anybody can answer that question, just let me know. That's all I have to say for this video. You can pick up many of the ISIS series books on Amazon.com in paperback and on Kindle. You can also, pick up other titles there. I have a large catalog that's close to 50 books right now. A lot of the books are very easy to access. Every story is its own entry point, and I believe you'll really enjoy books in the ISIS series, the East Team series, and the Temptation of John Haynes. The universe is very easy to access and easy to follow. I think you're going to really enjoy them, so just pick them up and give them a try. Again, that's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.